Okay, we are just shy of wrapping up We Agnostics. We are on page 56, the very bottom paragraph that starts with "Thus was our friend's cornerstone." But before we do, David's just going to do a little quick recap for us. The story we were reading to close out last week, and then we'll wrap up We Agnostics and get into how it works. How exciting!
hmm Thank you, David. My name is David. I'm a recovered alcoholic drug addict. We're going to be on page 56 in the bottom paragraph, but I'm going to do our recap on the bottom of page 55, fifth paragraph, which is the last paragraph. So we're talking about a gentleman. His name is John Henry Fitzhugh Mayo. So he was actually third AA in New York to get sober after Hank Parkhurst. So it was Bill, Hank Parkhurst, and then what they commonly called him, Fitz. Um, he is a very significant player in Alcoholics Anonymous. Reason being is he lived with his sister when he first got sober, and she lived in Washington D.C. So when Bill was writing the big book and the fellowship in itself was trying to come up with a title for the book, they came up with titles like "The Way Out." So Fitz being living with his sister early in sobriety, I'm not sure how long he lived with her in early sobriety, but Bill summoned him to go to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. and see how many books were entitled, if any at all, were titled The Way Out. We'll come to find out there was 12 books named The Way Out. Well, Bill wasn't going to have the 13th book called The Way Out. That would be the bad luck, and it would also be something that he didn't want to repeat. So him and Clarence Schneider actually were kind of attributed to naming the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. So they have a big hand in all that stuff. So what we want to look for as we go to page 56 of the book is things that he was dogged by. You know, he was shadowed by a whole lot of stuff in his story. And these are also identifiable pages. This first paragraph on page 56, you know, he was a minister's son. He attended church school. So he had became rebellious in religion. He also had business failures, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, a lot of calamities, all these things. And the very bottom of that paragraph that talks about brought him to the point of self-destruction. Well, self-destruction is suicide, guys, and that is nothing to laugh at or take lightly here because we either get sobered up, locked up, or covered up, and he was just about ready to get covered up by taking his own life. So what had happened to him is he got confined to a hospital room. He did not commit suicide, obviously. He was approached by an alcoholic. So we don't know who that alcoholic is. We're going to assume it's either Hank Parkhurst or Bill Wilson. Probably it was Bill Wilson. And as Bill approached him in that second paragraph, it says, "Our friend's gorge rose." So his anger, his neck muscles, or everything he got upset because Bill Bill's trying to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to him, and Fitz is a victim. He is taking the victim stance. He says in if there's a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. So that's a victim stance, and a victim that's power. And when we find out that's self pity, and later in the book we're going to find out there's 100 forms of self pity, self delusion, and stuff like that. So the wonderful part about this is we keep reading on, and we don't even have to finish this paragraph. It says, "It is possible that is it possible? This is a question. Is it possible that all religious people I have known are wrong?" This is a similar experience that Bill had. If you read Bill's story in the front of the book, Bill's having the similar experience here. So this is kind of a step two thing. He's in a meditative state, even though he doesn't really realize it, to have that kind of thought. And while pondering the answer, that's the meditative state, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. And here it is. Who are you to say there is no God?
Mm.
This The man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over through him with certainty and majesty of a great tide of flood. So this is an experience he's had. He's also talks about. Let me see. Let me get on this page. Um, it's a sudden spiritual experience. Not all of us have that. A lot of us have a
Mm.
spiritual awakening. He had the same experience that Bill had. It's okay. It's a psychic change. Something different happened to him that he could not have brought on himself. He could not have done that on his own power. And it was in a short couple paragraphs here. So the last thing I want to point out is these barriers in that paragraph. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. So that's all my preconceived thoughts or opinions. Everything, all my old ideas taken away. Way we do that is through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. In the second step, we got to start letting go of some of our old ideas. And 3, we make a decision. But through the work, then we do the work in the 4 through 9, and we have a relationship with this. Start have a relationship with power. And then he stood in capital letters here in this paragraph. He said he stood in the presence, capital P, of infinite power, IMP, and love. All references to a power greater than himself. He has stepped from the bridge to shore. That is harmony. He has not experienced that ever before. This is his first time. He lived in a conscious companionship with his creator. Creator is capital C. So he is having he is access to God, and God is available to him. Now it's up to him to continue to do this work so he can have the effectiveness and understanding that God intended for us all to have. That's all I got there.
Okay. Let us do this. Bottom 56. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude has shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. Samwise?
Yep, I have some definitions here.
Please.
I have cornerstone, which is defined as indispensable and fundamental beginning or basis. And another definition, a stone at a corner of a building, which is often used for holding historical information. And then I'm going to butcher this word. Vicissitude?
Vicissitude.
Vicissitude. Okay. It is defined as change of condition. So no later change of, maybe that doesn't make sense in the sentence actually.
Spelt it out.
No, the definition for the word.
All right, you want to look for another one?
Yeah.
We can come back to you on that.
And then also I have revulsion, which is a sudden or strong reaction, change of feeling, and the like. So in the sentence, save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned, and at such times a great, sudden, and strong reaction has risen up in him.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sam. So anybody spotting anything in this reading? It sounds like maybe a little preview of something yet to come, say about 30 pages hence. Perhaps the 10th step promises. So David and I are always saying we don't want to jump forward in the book, but of course we can't help ourselves, and we won't do a deep dive into the 10th step promises, but just parallel what is being described here. And we'll take a quick, just a little sneak preview at those 10 step promises. So this guy had his alcoholic problem taken away, means removed, right? That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Strong language, guys, except for a few brief moments of temptation, right? Again, I don't know about you guys. I'm an alcoholic. Every once in a blue moon, it occurs to me to have a drink. But what happens to me is the same thing that happened to this guy. At such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly could not drink, even if he would. God restored his sanity. So before I even go to the 10 step promises, the last sentence there really is the key in this paragraph for me. God restored his sanity. Principally, this entire chapter, as we've been talking about, is the second step. There's a little segue into third too, right? We start to go from belief into faith a little bit in the content, but came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Again, sanity, Bill is not being broad here. He's not talking about all the other crazy quote unquote things we did in life, although of course we all did many crazy things. The sanity being talked about is exactly what this paragraph's about. God has restored his sanity as it relates to drinking. He can now differentiate the true from the false. Remember, this is what the doctor described in the doctor's opinion on the bottom of Roman numeral 28. Even though I know my drinking is injurious, when it occurs to me to drink, I'm paraphrasing, I cannot differentiate the true from the false about what will happen if I pick it up. The restoration of sanity, when it occurs to me, hey, a beer would sound good. I'm like, but I don't drink anymore. I haven't drank in 20 years. Save it for somebody else. Right? And those are the promises of the 10th step. So if you go to the bottom of 84, everybody's second to get there, but I'll just read them. Think about what we just experienced in this story and what are the promises of the 10th step that are there for all of us. Well, we've ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, last in that sentence. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We just read about that. They can tell the truth from the false of what happens if I drink. Thank you, Rob, for popping that up. Will seldom be interested in liquor, and if tempted, we're going to recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. What is normal? It is the opposite of how I used to behave. And we'll find that this has happened automatically. Now, listen, don't be confused about what that means. When it says it happens automatically, it doesn't mean that I didn't do a whole lot of work to get to this point to receive the promises. But what that means is that God did it for me as the result of my relationship with God. We'll see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. God does it based on our relationship. That's the miracle of it. We're neither fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a not drinking problem. It's not relevant to me anymore. It's just not a part of my life. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. You guys have probably heard me talking about swearing off 10,000 times. I've probably talked about it 10,000 times in this meeting. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. It just doesn't exist. Again, I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a not drinking problem. Drinking is just not relevant. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's our experience. This is how we react. How? Well, so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition.
Yeah, good job on that, David. So let's right in that first sentence it says, "Thus our friend's cornerstone fixed in place." What is a cornerstone? Well, literally, it's a stone in the corner of a building, but it is an important stone. So it also means the basic part of something. So that's our second step, the cornerstone. And the first step was our foundation. We have to have a strong foundation. And then it says his alcohol problem was taken away. So we're talking about his alcohol problem is the obsession of the mind. Without a consent, without his opinion, he's picking up drink after drink after drink. But this is gone, taken away, an obsession, gone. Who did that? We're going to find out in the next page over. But then it says that very night years ago, and that years ago was 3 years ago. Then it says disappeared. Safe for a few brief moments. Of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. So I don't want to go to it right now. I'm just going to tell you on page 84, third paragraph, it talks about if tempted, we'll recoil from it as from a hot flame. You know, that's just how we will react if we're in a recovered state of mind, body, and spirit. And then it says, this is a reference here. The first reference in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous to being restored to sanity. The second reference is what David talked about in the 10th step. And that is at the end of that paragraph. It says, God has restored his sanity. Doesn't say my sponsor restored my sanity. Doesn't say my wife restored my sanity. Doesn't say my doctor did or the judge did or anything like that. It's talking about God. It is perfectly clear to me. And if we want to, let's just take a look. Just hang on to page 57 and go back to 37 because Bill really gives a great description of insanity here on the top of the page. First full paragraph when you get there. He gives a description of insanity. So this is where he is. Fitz has been given sanity, clear thinking. So page 37, first paragraph. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Here's the definition: how can a lack a proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else. I know I'm gonna get locked up. I know she's gonna leave. I know I'm gonna lose my kids. I know, or maybe I don't. Maybe I can't recall the pain of a day or a week or a month ago. Doesn't matter. When I'm in an obsession, it overrides all my thinking. It shows up just like me, sounds just like me, and it tells me it's gonna be okay, or I just use the word F it. This page, back on page 57, I've been restored to sanity. If I'm going to stay restored to sanity, as David pointed out, I have to live the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. That's where we live all day long. The clock doesn't stop on 10. I have to live there all day long. And then I get that daily reprieve. That's how that works. So that's all I got on that.
Continuing on, first full paragraph on 57. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly asked himself to his maker. Then he knew. So, little bit more of, we're bridging 2 into 3 here. And I know this is a study of the big book, but I'm going to give you guys something from the 12 and 12. We'll see if I can throw Rob for a loop here, or if he's got some quotes from the 12 and 12 to splash up. So, circumstances made him willing to believe. Right? So, second step E, but in the third step in the 12 and 12, on the top of page 38, in the middle of this paragraph, dig this. So it is by circumstance, rather than by any virtue, that we have been driven to AA, have admitted defeat, have acquired the rudiments of faith, and now want to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to a higher power. What I love about this statement and how it dovetails so nicely with the concept of a circumstance here is that I'm yet to meet anybody, and this was not my experience. Like, I didn't wake up one morning and tick off all the things that were going great in my life and then think, maybe I should go check out one of those meetings today, do something about this drinking and drug problem. No, that wasn't my experience. Circumstances, the stuff externally in my life got really bad beyond what was already dying on the inside in my psyche, right? In my head, my heart, and my gut. Circumstances drove me into recovery. Circumstances made me willing to believe. And what are these circumstances in a very broad sense? I mean, again, we could tick off all these possible things. We could all fill out, here's all the stuff that's going wrong. But really, my particular circumstances are that somebody educates me on what the first step means, the powerlessness and the unmanageability. And I say, yeah, that's me. I'm powerless and my life's unmanageable. Those circumstances are going to make me willing to believe. Because if I'm powerless, I better come to believe in a power. Those are the exact circumstances. Otherwise, why would I believe? Why would I be willing to believe? I wouldn't. Right? I would keep trying to go on my power.
Yeah, so the question, I take that circumstance and turn into a question, as David was pointing out there. What circumstances made me willing? And as David brought up on page 38 of the 12 and 12, what brought me into Alcoholics Anonymous? Again, I didn't just drop a champagne glass by the pool and go, oh, maybe I have a drinking problem. That's not my story. It's way different than that. Yeah, is what brought me down to my knees, and it's a great place to be, of hopelessness. Absolutely hopeless. That's how I came in here. And I wouldn't have stayed if I wasn't. But this thing is the willingness and made him willing to believe. Believe in what? Believe, as David's point, a power greater than myself. Because I don't have any power, choice, or control. When I started seeing the truth in the whole thing, and we studied all the way up 67 pages now, 10 pages of the Dr. Pinion up to this point. We have learned a whole lot about ourselves at this point. But the thing I need to always keep in the forefront of my mind, which is always the qualifying paragraph on page 44, first paragraph, when I'm working with the new guys, I can ask them, when you start to drink, can you manage the amount you drink? Can you stop abruptly? Can you have 2 and just go home? Can you do that every single time? And when you stop, can you stay stopped? And if those answers are no, I can't do any of those things, then is the spiritual experience the result that you need? And the answer for me is yes. That's what I have to have. I need to have a spiritual experience. And we have the directions, a treasure map, which is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, to do that for us. And then the third step, then the last sentence there, he says, he humbly offered himself to his maker. Then he knew. That's the third step. When I turned my will, I made a decision to turn my will, my thinking, my life, my actions over to a power greater than myself. Why? Because I don't do a good job managing my own life. I have fired myself from my management position. I am no longer managing David Inc. Done. I'm just an employee. He is my employer. We'll find out more about that and these great promises that go through the book here. So this is really good stuff. And now we're going to see the final promises of the second step in this next paragraph.
Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. Let me repeat that. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. Go ahead, David.
Okay, so that's the promise. Even so, God has restored us to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was a spiritual experience. Some of us grow into a spiritual awakening, but he has come to all who have, this is the condition, honestly sought him. God is not lost. We're in the seeking business now. I'm continually always seeking for God. And as we found out on page 55, that he was deep down inside of each man, woman, and child. We found that out. And this book gives us precise, specific, and clear-cut directions on how to have access to this power. And then when we drew near him, he disclosed himself to us. This is my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not just stop in AA. I shouldn't say that. I don't segregate my life in different areas today. I try to live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12 all day. I am awake, not asleep, dreaming I'm awake. The steps have provided that for me. I have access to this power all day long. And my life looks so much different than it ever did. And I'm not just talking like 25 years ago. I'm even talking like last year, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago. I need to grow in effectiveness and understanding what God's will is for us. And these promises are so wonderful. They show up in all our lives because he started out by saying, even so has God restored us. We're talking about the first 100. So I am just like the first 100. I have no power, no choice or control, but I'm a recovered state of mind and body and spirit today.
Yeah, lump me in with the us based on my experience for sure. And so even so has God restored us all to our right minds. Again, principally what we're talking about is the restoration of sanity as it relates to our discernment, our judgment, our decision making around what would happen if I pick up a drink. And to this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. Remember, in the spiritual experience appendix 2, we read, I don't even know, a long time ago, we covered it. That appendix was added in the second edition because of Bill's story and Fitz's story and some of the other ones. Everybody read the big book and was like, oh my God, I'm supposed to have this spiritual experience, right? And just when David and I are talking about the book, we use spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, psychic change interchangeably. Sort of technically, when Bill was using these expressions, spiritual experience was like the boom, like, thunderbolt moment, tumble out of bed, instantly better, whereas spiritual awakening was more gradual. And so the spiritual experience appendix talks about this. But the other thing it says most of us have the educational variety, right? The gradual time, that over time we got better. I think for most of us, in the same way it talks about on page 30, so we learned that we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were real alcoholics. I think we learn that we can create and maintain this healthy relationship with God as we understand him. It's all about learning here, right? Why do I have to learn so much? Because everything I knew was wrong, right? Oh, my spiritual guru Yoda, he says, you must unlearn what you have learned. Think about that. We so frequently go back to page 27, right? That our thoughts, our emotions, and our attitudes, the stuff in my head, my heart, my gut get cast aside and replaced by new ones. God's going to do that for me as a result of my relationship. But I identified the problems in those three areas, and I have to do a little work to let go of those things. All right. So he has come to all who have honestly sought him. That's a promise.
Mm-hmm.
When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. That's a promise. And it's not a far trip. Again, I don't have to go wandering in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to seek God. Remember, God's not lost. We're not hunting and finding, it's a searching, it's a development of my getting close to God. And he's already right here in Mabele, where he's been my whole life, but I was covering up with alcohol and cocaine and all sorts of other intoxicants and process addictions as well.
Yeah, like David's explaining or having sharing his experience the same way I have my experience. I know him very well because we do a lot of work together and we talk almost on a daily basis. And we also give each other spiritual consent. And if you don't know what a spiritual consent is, the spiritual consent means that if he sees something in me, some behavior of mine that's abnormal from my normal behavior of having a relationship with God and I'm acting out of my own free will, he has the right to call me on it. And when he calls me on it, I don't get to debate it or argue about it. I get to consider it and I get to go home and pray about it. And then we have a discussion. I kind of find out that my perception, this is a disease of perception, is usually skewed. But what he's saying and what I hear and with my experience is when I read this textbook, as I read this text over and over and over again, I again have a spiritual awakening through the working of these steps. I don't know how many times I've read this book. I don't even know. It's like hundreds of times, right? But each and every time I have this and I study with you guys, I'm having another awakening. New things pop up. They become part of my life today. I get to put them in practical action and put them in motion today. It's amazing what this does. And that's why me personally, I'm not telling anyone else that they need it. I do not read the big book word for word with my sponsees. I just don't. I want them to have their own spiritual experience with this thing. I want them to have that. Yeah. So we're going to study it together throughout. I mean, I got an outline that I like to use, and if you have questions, you can come to me. But I want you to have your own spiritual experience, not mine. Have your own.
Yeah, we've been asked that before too. I don't know if she's here tonight, but Amy, who's usually here with us, said, well, if you don't go word by word, how do you take somebody through the steps out of the book? And the short answer is if you go to our little group's website, purposeofthisbook.com, go down to the bottom. It's only a one-page website. At the very bottom, there's some files there, and there's a little synopsis of the exact pages that David and I take our sponsees through. We're step guiding someone. Step 1, step 2, step 3, the exact paragraphs and pages. And there's a link to a recording where we're talking about all those pages over the course of an hour. We did a 12-week series. We took the steps together over 12 weeks and 12 sessions. And so it's all there. So if you're not feeling confident, or maybe you're sponsoring for the first time, we got a resource for you. Is it the only way? No. Is it a way? Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of We Agnostics. That was fun, as always. So much fun. All right. Chapter 5. Flipping over the next page, gang. Page 58. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. I don't know if you have rigorous, Sam, but look that one up, please, if you don't. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Sam Wines, you got any words? I know I just gave you an assignment. Okay, we'll get started. Go ahead, David. Start us out.
All right, so let's start out with the title of the chapter. How it works. What is the it? The it is the program. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous. 164 pages plus the doctor's opinion. The forwards in the front of the book, the title page. The whole thing is the it. How it works. I need to know how it works. I need to know a little bit of the history in the forwards. I need to know about Bill's story. I need to know what the doctor tells us when we put alcohol in our body, what happens to us. And when I have nothing in my body, what happens to me, that I become irritable, restless, discontent. And Carl Jung, as David brought up, that I need this vital spiritual experience, all the whole thing. And then I even have to know what's on page 30, that I have to concede to my innermost self. I will find the steps coming up very soon. We haven't brought up the steps exactly in order in the book yet. We're still studying the text up to this point. We're still in step 2, as a matter of fact. It says, rarely have we seen a person fail. And I used to say, Bill meant to say never. Well, that's a fabrication. He never meant to say never. And if you read Pass It On page 20, it tells you that. That's a book. But he doesn't mean to say it. He says, rarely have we seen a person fail who is thoroughly. David and I use this word a lot. Thoroughly and honestly. That was like, we used to chuckle a lot when we first started doing live big book studies. Right when COVID let up, I think it was, I believe, or maybe it was before COVID. I can't remember. But we used to use that a lot because it's true. If I'm honest and thorough, I will get some direction in my life. I will get some traction. And this is followed by a path. Who thoroughly followed our path, not my path, the path of the first 100, the ones who all recovered, every one of them. Those who do not recover, people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. I got to completely give myself. Half measures avail us nothing. What if I give you 90%? Nothing. 95? Nothing. 98? No. Half measures avail me absolutely nothing. And then it says themselves to this simple program. It is a simple program. I'm complicating the living heck out of this thing. I sponsor a lot of guys who've been sober 20 plus years. And sometimes we have to, Katie Parker saying, you got to walk the dog backwards. If you know what that means, you start with 12, find out if they've had a spiritual experience, find out if they're carrying this message to alcoholics and practice these principles all in their affairs. And they start answering, oh, well, the awakening's kind of gone away. Not practicing these principles in all my life, and I'm not working with anybody. Let's go back to 11. Then we find out about prayer and meditation. We go back in 10. Are you living in 10 all day long? Then we find out you're not doing a 10 step all day long. 9, have you made all your amends? You follow me what I'm saying? That's Katie's reference to walking the dog backwards. I got to walk the dog backwards to find out where I'm at in the steps. What am I not doing? So it says, people who cannot. I have not met anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous. I met a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that are cannots.
Will not?
Well, I'm sorry, will nots.
Yeah, I knew you were
But
going.
no cannots. I haven't really met any cannots. You can't do this? Well, will nots. You know, they get an external experience. Things get better at work, things get better with mama, bank account starts growing out, everything externally, but nothing internally changes in the inside. And they go back out and drink again. That's called a chronic relapser. And then they give themselves to this simple program using men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. Bill uses the word honest a number of times on this page. I'm brand new. I'm not honest. I don't even know how to be honest. Are you kidding me? Everything I say is a lie. I lie just because for the sake of it. I can't even, everything I say is a lie. And then it says they are such unfortunate. They're not a fault. They seem to have been born that way. I was definitely a liar. I remember lying at 5 years old about things long before I pick up a drink, just to lie. Like if I would have just told the truth, I wouldn't have got the beating. But I lied, and it was a terrible lie. I was a terrible liar. Does anyone think they were a really good liar?
I'm a terrible
liar. You're not a good liar.
Sam was a good liar. We'll ask your boyfriend what he thinks.
They're naturally incapable of developing a manner of living. What is the manner of living we're talking about? Our way of living. We talked about it earlier in the book. Our way of living. It's a different way than I've ever lived before. And maybe it was the way I was supposed to be living all along, but alcoholism got in the way of that and blocked me from it, the selfish self-centeredness in me. And when I get free of that kind of stuff, then I can have this manner of living, which here's the demand, which is a must, demands rigorous honesty. I have to be rigorously honest with someone. We're going to have a step for that. We're also going to have another step for that. We have 3 inventory steps that we can do. And their chances are less than average. Again, like I said, I can't put 50% into this thing. I got to be all in or nothing. But less than average. So 50%, you can still recover. I don't suggest you go back out and drink a drug. Please understand. But you still got a chance because it's less, even if you're less than average, you can still recover if you can't be honest. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional mental disorders. Absolutely. Please go get treatment for those things. But many of them recover if they have the capacity, to be honest. How am I going to get the capacity to be honest? First, I'm going to look at the symptoms of this illness that I have. And I'm going to find out that I do have them. And do I desperately need power? Do I desperately need Alcoholics Anonymous? And that is my jumping off point. That's all I got there.
Sam Wise, you want to come in?
Yeah, I do have some definitions here. I have thorough, which is defined as exhaustively complete, painstakingly accurate or careful in absolute.
Exhaustively complete. I want everyone to really think about that definition. All right, what else you got?
And then I have rigorous. Did rigorous or constitutionally came up first?
Both.
Constitutionally. Okay. Constitutionally is defined as by their basic nature and in agreement with the essential nature of a person.
That's a perfect definition of that right there.
And then rigorous is defined as very strict, rigid, severe, exact, inflexible.
Very strict honesty, rigorous honesty. Right? That it? Thank you. Okay, so I probably safe assumption that of everybody in this study, we've heard the How It Works reading more than anything else in 12-step recovery, right? We've heard it hundreds, thousands, 10,000 times, some of us, right? But I find when we study, we break it down. If you're like me, some of you are, I'm all tuned out. You know, like we're at the meeting and I'm like, all right, we're doing another reading and I'm thinking about what time are the Bears kicking off or something like that, right? But when we stop and I actually read it and study, this is such powerful content in the book, you know? So I'm sure I'm going to be repeating some of the stuff that David said, but I won't be able to help myself. And I think it's worth the doubling down. So rarely, means very infrequently, have we seen a person fail who has, what was thoroughly again, Sam? Exhaustively complete. Rarely we see a person fail who has been exhausting in following our path. Okay? And the path, as David said, is it's steps, but it's not just the steps, right? Again, we talk about it a lot. We get it. We got the equilateral triangle. We've got recovery. We've got unity. We've got service. All of that's our path, right? We got to do all the work. We cannot be single legacy members of a fellowship. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not. David hit this bang on the head. A lot of will nots. So many will nots, you know? Cannots, I don't know. It goes on to talk about some people who, you know, because of their grave emotional and mental disorders, they can't. I don't know. I bet half of us here probably have some other mental health diagnosis that are in this study tonight. We're all here. You know, so many people in all my fellowships have some other mental health issue. Get the help we need. And I never know in which direction it's going to go. Some people that I've experienced, they got to get to God first, and then they get their wits about them enough to go and get the help with the other mental illness. And sometimes it's the converse. If they don't get that mental health condition treated first, they got no shot in recovery because maybe that condition doesn't let them be honest, you know, doesn't matter, whatever it takes, whatever order it follows, right? But for some of us, it's multiple things, right? So people cannot or will not completely, another word, a synonym for thoroughly. I think we can draw those together, right? So people who cannot or will not thoroughly give themselves to this simple program. Why is this simple? Is the execution of the work simple? No. The work is very difficult, especially at the beginning. But what we're asked to do intellectually is pretty simple. It's all laid out here. And if I get a big book sponsor, a big book step guide, that makes it simpler yet. It's usually men and women who are, by their very nature, as Sam gave us, incapable of being honest with themselves. Right? I think I've met some people like that. I'm not sure I've met them in recovery, but I think I've met some people like that, sadly. There are such unfortunates. Some percentage of the population is going to have this condition that who they are, maybe they're sociopaths or psychopaths. I'm just playing amateur therapist here. Just can't be honest, right? They're not at fault. It's not about blame. They are sick. They seem to have been born that way. They're just naturally, in their being constitutionally, incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living, which is dependent on what? Strenuous, rigorous, intensive, exhaustive honesty. So their chances because of this are less than average. But Bill doesn't say there's no chance. He just says it's less than average. It's a tougher road, but they can still make it. And there are those two who suffer from grave. You guys know what grave means? Deadly. Grave emotional and mental disorders. But many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Right? Again, some of us have many afflictions. I'm not a psychiatrist, right? I can't say what's got to be addressed first. But for some of us to have those grave disorders, please get the help you need. Then come in here and get the God too, right? And David was talking about thorough and honest and where that comes from. So, you know, in this paragraph, we've got honest, honesty, and honest. And then we've got thorough, and we've got, you know, I threw out one of those synonyms for it, completely, right? So thoroughness and honesty are thrown around a lot in that one paragraph. And where they're used together is actually on the bottom of page 65, after the little 3-column chart in the fourth step. After the chart, Bill says, we went back to our lives, big, small sentence, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. So in that, Bill is talking specifically about how we write those 3 columns. However, if you think about it, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty is really a microcosm of our entire approach to 12-step recovery. Somebody says, I don't know if I did my 4-step correctly. Well, were you thorough and honest? I don't know if I did all my steps correctly. Well, were you thorough and honest? It's a pretty simple qualifier, right? And that's why I think Bill's hitting it so hard in this opening paragraph, right? He's really trying to pound these 2 principles into our heads.
So, yeah. So the whole thing, so if we're looking at this chapter up to this point, I'm looking for, because I've been sober for a little bit, precise, specific, and clear-cut directions. But if you've been paying attention, as I have, I wasn't for a very long time, Bill gives us no clear-cut directions yet. There's not been any clear-cut directions at this point. We will get clear-cut directions as we get to steps 3 and 4, and we're coming up upon them really quickly. But what David talked about, and Sam gave us the definition of this thoroughly. So this exhaustive and completely is what I got to be doing. I got to go 100% in, as if a case of a drowning man. I cannot let up on this whole thing. So this is precise. Like, I have to do this work here. So what I found out is I let the testimony of others bear witness to this power. That's what happened in my life today, right? I let others bear witness to the testimony of their power in their life. And then I got to think honestly. And then I got to search diligently inside myself. And when I do that kind of stuff here, because we've already touched on those things in the second step, then my life will start to change. And then the minimum promise is I'll be relieved of addiction. The maximum promise is I'll be relieved of the unmanageability in my life. Minimum is addiction. And you know what I'm talking about? For the people who come in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, sit in a chair, and through osmosis, they think the guy next to them is going to give them the spiritual awakening, or they're going to work the steps off the wall. The minimum promise is they can be relieved of the addiction. That's a problem. That's not the problem. The problem is my life is unmanageable. I have this spiritual malady. That is the greater promise. That gets removed by a power greater than myself. That's why I have to have this manner of living, which demands rigorous honesty. Because you know what I hated? I didn't hate alcohol and cocaine. I loved alcohol and cocaine, but I hated myself. I loathed myself when I got here. And I don't today. I'm not madly in love with myself all the time. I'm getting old. But I got to tell you, this is the body and the face that God gave me, so I got to live with it.
Can you riff for one more minute? You made me think of something I want to pick from another piece of our literature.
Yeah, I can certainly try. Well, okay, here's one. So, you guys ever heard the chicken and the pig story? So the chicken and the pig, they're walking down the street. So the chicken and the pig are walking down the street, and they come across a sign on the corner, and they said, taking food donations. So the chicken says to the pig, goes, "Hey, we could help them with that." And the pig looks at him and goes, "How can we help them with that?" The chicken said, "Well, I can donate some eggs. I can give them some eggs, and we'll help the food pantry out." And he goes, "Well, that's pretty considerate of you, but quite a commitment on my part to give up myself here, because all he's got is he's a pig. Gonna take some ham off of him. So that's the commitment. That's really what I got to be able to do. I got to be willing to commit, 100% commit to this thing. I don't get to have halfway. So that's my pig and chicken story. So
I'm sorry, it inspired me, but I can't find it fast enough. I don't want to slow us down. I'll circle back to it if I can find it. All right, continuing on 58, second paragraph. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Go ahead.
okay. So our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like. So I always thought this is where I stand at the podium and I tell you my drunk-a-log for 45 minutes. And 5 minutes of what happened. 5 minutes ago, oh yeah, and I haven't drank in a little while. That's all I got. No, that's not what this is saying. There's pages in the book that tell me when I had, like pages 29 and 52 tell me when to tell my story. But this is telling me this. Our stories disclose in a general way what my life looked like on self-will, running on self-will, what happened, the special spiritual revelation, and what we are like now, running on God's willpower. That's what I'm supposed to be looking at. Our stories, that's what I'm looking at, not my drunk-a-log, not what happened. Yes, I had a spiritual awakening. I had a moment of clarity. That's another thing I'm going to talk about. I had a moment of clarity. That was my spiritual revelation. What happened? I was in a psych ward. Someone pointed out to me in that psych ward that my wife called the police on me the last time I took a drink and a drug, and I got handcuffed and taken off, and I ended up in a psych ward. Good place for me to be, safe place for everyone. But I was in a treatment center in a psych ward with a bunch of people, none of them alcoholics and drug addicts. And in there for my third day of detoxing, finally I could say something. And I said, I hate my wife for making that phone call. I'll never talk to her again. Our relationship's over with. And one of the patients looked directly at me, that was probably on Thorazine, because it took her 15 minutes to tell me this, seemingly anyways. She said to me, she goes, "If you blame your wife for making this phone call, you'll never get sober, David." Not a doctor, not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. A patient told me that. That is a moment of clarity where God froze the liar long enough in me, and I took an action against my nature, and I went down to the payphone, and I called someone Alcoholics Anonymous, and my life has never been the same ever again. That is a moment of clarity. That's what I'm supposed to be discussing. What happened? God showed up as a miracle, froze the liar in me, and I did something against my nature. I asked you for help, and my life has never been the same again. Now, what does my life look like running at God's will? That is what I'm supposed to be giving hope. Hope is described to me as a vision beyond my present circumstances. And when we're in treatment centers, David and I, we try to press this upon them. They get it, and sometimes they don't get it, because they're just, some of them towards the end of their stay there, they're just thinking about how to get back with mama and how they're going to get back to the job. And what the main concern has to be is, like, if you're a real alcoholic or drug addict, because we're not there to diagnose you, you're going to relapse and you're going to drink and drug again in your own power. But back to the text here. If you decide you want what we have, what do they have? Well, it says a manner of living, which I'm not accustomed to in the prior paragraph, a way of life, freedom from the bondage of self. I don't know this yet, but that's what they have. And are willing to go to any lengths. What is willing any lengths? Show up in pajamas in a meeting, run around the block naked? No, that's not what it means. Willingness to go to any lengths means do this work. is if your ass is on fire, and it is. My ass is on fire if I don't do this work. I am going to die. That is so selfish. I have a family. I'm going to drink myself to death. But I have a reprieve right now. So to get ready to take certain steps. So if I take these certain steps, meaning if I follow directions, follow directions, not suggestions, directions. I got to follow directions here. That's it.
So I found what I was looking for. And this is from pamphlet number 41, which is a member's eye view of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's just going off what David said about the problem of newcomers sitting in meetings. So page 14, member's eye view of AA says, how many of you relate to this, guys? There's a widely held belief in AA that if a newcomer will simply continue to attend meetings, something will finally rub off on you. And the implication, of course, is that the something which rubs off will be this so-called miracle of AA. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that many people in AA accept this statement quite literally. I have observed them over the years. They faithfully attend meetings, faithfully waiting for something to rub off. The funny part about it is that something is rubbing off on them. Death. They sit there week after month after year while mental, spiritual, and physical rigor mortis slowly sets in. I believe the real miracle of AA, the something that will rub off, we hope, is simply the alcoholic's willingness to act. Why he finally becomes willing, I hope to touch on later. Right now, let's turn our attention to what it is he becomes willing to do. I ask this frequently. Anybody have somebody in their life that died from alcoholism or drug addiction? And usually I see nods and hand raise. Yeah, a lot of us have. And then the question is, anybody seen anybody die from alcoholism or drug addiction that was a fellow in your fellowships? And a lot of us say, yeah. Why? Because they're in that class of people who are coming and going and they're complaining to their buddies. Yeah, I tried AA. It didn't work for me. But did they try AA? Or did they just show up to some meetings, and did we all fall down on the job, helping them understand their real problem and presenting the real solution to them? Right. One of the Ramers is always saying this, David and I have taken it up. All of our problems in 12-step fellowships could be solved by better sponsorship. Our greatest problem is piss poor sponsorship. Right. And I say we all take responsibility for this. Let's not let death rub off on the next newcomer who comes into our meeting. All right, let's get their phone number. Let's call them. Let's say, I'll take you through the steps. Are you going to be my sponsor? Let's not even worry about that. Let's get through the steps. This is our obligation to carry the message. The 12th step is not an option. Wrong old word. It's an obligation.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say one more thing too, because I highlighted willing to go to any links. So willing to get any links here. So if I went back to page 25 of our book, and you don't really have to, but it means working the steps because first of all, willing to go to any links means I need to know that the window of opportunity is going to close on me real quickly. It's going to shut, and the new guy too. But if I go back to 25 in the first paragraph halfway down, what will be the result? And I take guys back to this page. We have found much of heaven. We've been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we have not even dreamed. That is a promise. That isn't there's a solution. We read this earlier on. And then in the second paragraph says the fact is just this and nothing less, that we had a deep and effective spiritual experience. We have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central factor of life today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered our hearts and our lives in which ways indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for which we can never do ourselves. If I'm working with a new guy, this is why it's so imperative, if I've studied this text up to this point, that I get him quickly to a third step prayer on my knees, make that decision, and then sit down and do a fourth step. Get ready to do it. And I write out the first two for him on the fourth step. I don't leave him with a blank piece of paper and go to town on this dude. I help him write out the first two things. Then I set him a date. this is when I expect you to have it done. We're going to be doing your fifth step. I'm doing one Saturday at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. I got it written down somewhere with the guy out of state. He's doing the work. I would be there for him.
Hey, real quick before we wrap up, you want to just talk about what you're when you're talking about the window of opportunity closing?
The women, well, we don't know what the window of opportunity looks like. Howard does a good talk on this, and Kathy, right? So, what is the window of opportunity? Is like we don't know when that's going to shut. So when I first get in here, we just say, just go to 90 meetings in 90 days and call me every day. Dude, first of all, you don't need to call me every day. I don't sponsor that way necessarily. But I am going to direct you to certain meetings that are literature-based meetings. I don't want you just going to a bunch of meetings that are going to talk about problems. I don't want that stuff. We're going to get busy and do the work probably that night. I'm going to introduce you to the first two steps and maybe the third step. And I've gotten on my knees. And that's what they did in the fellowship early on. By the time the first night is, you're going upstairs. If you read step 11 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about upon awakening comes after our evening review. Probably because they went upstairs and did the first 8 steps and they came back down getting ready to do 9. So this is so important to get them through this quickly. It is a race. And Howard uses this. My addiction is running parallel to me all the time. I have to be awake to that. So take them quickly through this work. And then there's plenty of time to go through the traditions then afterwards. And then back to the steps again. And then they need to start carrying this message to other alcoholics. You should never ask me to do anything quickly. I don't know how to do that. Only to speak quickly.
That's perfect place to end. Let me kill the recording.